Yeah. So how do we challenge these existing structures of innovation in these big firms?
Well, I think you have to redefine what success looks like. And I also think it's really dependent on the business model. My experience has been a lot of startup infusion within corporates, and I think often there's a real big chasm or difference between how the two operate. And what ends up happening is you kind of have this external innovation that happens at like an innovation lab where you don't have a lot of middle level managers coming in and stripping out talent, and you let these people do what they do best, which is create. And ultimately, yeah, you can start to actually see like, cool, do they have an MVP? Yes. Have they actually gotten some level of traction, whether it's letters of affirmation from clients saying, like potential clients saying, yes, I would use this once it's built. It's the same way that you go about building a startup. And so I would say that if you looked at it almost as like startups being built inside of a company that are maybe a little less hands-on from the standpoint of middle management and upper management, I think you're able to really see kind of the same benchmarks that you get out of maybe the way that an accelerator would work. Whereas I do think when it's an internal project and you're taking people off of existing projects and putting them all on this new big thing, people end up spending just an absurd amount of money. And I've been on those contracts on stuff that would maybe take me and my team a month to do, where it's like, okay, cool. You have a new conversion flow, new website, and you want to generate a ton of content. Got you. That's maybe a 3 month gig, maybe. And you come into these projects and it's like, well, hold on, you guys have been doing this for 12 months. Like, what's going on? And to not have at least an understanding of how long it ordinarily takes, I think you really run the risk of just spending way too much time, energy, and effort to see nothing happen.
Yeah.
But that's my perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I think that in general, when you work with people who are like business owners and they work with lots of environments and lots of companies, they see things differently than someone who's like maybe 5, 10 years in the same company. And for him, he gets his salary if he's doing a good job or not, if he's accelerating or not. That's what he's doing, right? And as a business owner, if you don't do the best, you will not be chosen and somebody else will be chosen, right? So you need to do the best way of handling the effort, the money, the resources, and everything needs to be accelerated. And you don't have this, benefit of doing things, calmly. And for me, because I come from, in Israel, everything is going fast and the startups are really, really fast. And when I go to these companies, sometimes I think like, how can you work so slow? It's like so hard for me just to handle the fact that everything, each decision takes time.
Yep.
It's like anything they need to execute takes so much time because they don't feel a startup knows exactly that they have these kind of like, that's the limits, that's the time, that's the resources, we need to do the best that we can within it. And you don't have this like people so engaged and motivated when you just get your salary whatever, like you don't need to do anything more than what you're doing right now.
I totally agree. I think that's why it makes it kind of this vicious cycle that exists. The amount of companies that have come and gone from. You know what? I have statistics on this. Hold on, give me a second.
Wow, I
I
would love
pulled
to
up
see.
I had pulled up this old presentation that I had put together, just to refer to every once in a while as notes. And every so often, I remember kind of these crazy statistics. I don't have it in front of
Mhm,
me, can't get it up,
mhm.
but it was basically the amount of companies that were on the Fortune 500 list between it was 1954 to 2016. I think it was basically of the 500 companies that were originally there, you were looking at a total of like 13 or 14. And so all of these big companies, they do the right thing for too long. And also, when you're in a large organization, life is friggin' amazing. Like, you get all the great perks. You get an amazing salary. There is no sense of urgency. It's like, look, I have arrived. I've made it. I'm working at IBM or I'm working at whatever the big company is. Why on earth would you strive to outdo anybody else in the market other than to have kind of your own sense of self-worth, which after a certain point, if I'm making 250 grand a year, do I really care that much? Is it going to affect me if I pump out a couple more units, or I really bust my butt in order to make these goals that I think are arbitrary to begin with? Probably not. But I think that level of passion that comes out of startups, you can't really duplicate it. And that's why it's always that death by a thousand cuts. It's the big company. It's like, oh, we're never going to get disrupted. We've been the market leader for 10 years. And then you turn around, it's like, wow, that happened pretty quick. And it's like, yeah, I know, because you guys lost track of what made you great to begin with. And I think that's just called progress. If there was always one company on top forever, I think it'd be a very boring kind of space to be in general. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But don't you feel that the big tech companies are so sophisticated right now that it will be so hard to to win anything against them, especially, like companies like Amazon doing everything. They are always innovating, always opening new things or buying new startups, or like they are always on this quest for something which is more. How can a small company really compete with that? It's like it's
depends
very
on,
different in that
yeah,
case.
I totally agree. I think it's gotten a lot more challenging. I had a fun moment with some of these people. I live in Copenhagen, Denmark, and it's a much smaller ecosystem than I'm used to. When I got here in 2016, it was, yeah, just kind of blossoming. And I had come from Washington, D.C., where the startup ecosystem had been there for a good 20 years. And if you go even further west, thing had been going for a good 40, 50 years.
Right.
But it's so interesting sitting and talking with these people because they were sharing all these amazing stories of launch parties and how they had no idea what they were doing, and they got a ton of funding and all these things. And they're like, oh God, those were the days. Now it's different. And I'm like, yeah, you have to have talent. And before
Yeah.
you just had to show up. I think
Yeah.
now it creates such a competitive market space that it makes it so much more interesting to be in a competitive level. I do think that you'll eventually see the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons eventually disintegrate and give way to something that we're not familiar with right now. Every social network that you've seen, nobody's talking about MySpace today. I have so many arguments with my girlfriend on a regular basis. She's like, Facebook's for old people. And it's like, well, I'm
Yeah.
using Facebook, pardon me. This will continue to be the same way, whether it's a marketplace or for hosting or for shopping. People that are very concerned about the way that they search, maybe they don't want to use Google anymore. Google makes up like 98% of all searches these days. But as DuckDuckGo is continuing to gain momentum, people are realizing, like, hey, I don't want to be shown a ton of ads. I'd actually like to be able to generate my own revenue off of whatever I'm shown. That will take the place.